Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be doing a new kind of video. So, we have now found out all 8 coaches that will be coaching the inaugural season in the USFL, so I decided that we're going to be ranking them from worst to best. Now, naturally this is subjective, as you can, I guess, make a case for almost any of them to be the best or worst, though there's a couple that are clearly on top and a couple that are kind of at the bottom. But for me, how I'm judging this is simply put based on this. The USFL is meant to be a supplemental league, so it is going to be featuring a good amount of players that either have graduated high school recently, are college guys, or are young guys in the NFL. So with that knowledge, I feel the most important is someone who is a genuinely good coach at college, but that has some professional experience. To put it simply, I think a college head coach that has a bit of NFL assistant coaching, like offense coordinator, defense coordinator, is better suited for the job than, let's say, an NFL head coach who only coached at college like a couple of years, like 15 years ago, is basically how I view that. Now, naturally, your success at college or pros or whatever league does matter as well. And that also is taken into consideration on who I think is the worst and best head coach. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 8, or the worst coach in the USFL, is going to be one of the 2 newest hires, and that is Larry Fedora. Larry Fedora is going to be the head coach / GM of the New Orleans Breakers, and I think he is the worst of all the coaches. Now, it's not to say he's a bad coach. I'm going to be real with you. The USFL did a really good job at getting guys who are all qualified coaches for a league like this. It's just Larry Fedora is, I genuinely believe, the worst of all of them. And it mainly comes down to this. He is one of the 4 guys who is mainly a college head coach. And of those 4, he has the worst overall record in terms of the bowls. He is 3-5 in bowl games, and in terms of what he did aside from that, he never really won anything really. In 2011, he did win Conference USA for whatever that's worth, and then he did win a division title in the ACC when he was with North Carolina. But with UNC, overall, his team wasn't exactly the greatest, aside from that one year where they went 8-0 in conference and 11-3 overall, and then lost in the playoffs. That year was his best year, and they were ranked 15th in the polls, which it saw that you were ranked, but that was it. And then aside from that, the last 2 years he was there in 2017 and 18, his teams went 3-9 and 2-9, and he, of course, didn't have a bowl game appearance. And I feel like when you end your career like that, and considering the fact that when you're coaching at UNC for a few years, you should be a lot better than just a 1-4 team in bowl games. Because 2 of his 3 wins in bowls came when he was with Southern Miss. But when he was at UNC and playing against more of the big boy type teams in the Power 5, he just wasn't able to compete that well when it mattered most. And overall, I feel like that's something that hinders him a bit. But I will say he definitely has some qualities, but his biggest flaw to me as well is not only is he the worst of the college main guys, but he also never coached in the pros whatsoever. He was never even like an assistant or a coordinator. In fact, the last couple of jobs he had was as an analyst at Texas and an offensive coordinator at Baylor. And that was back in 2020. So I think overall he is the worst head coach out of the 8. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Kirby Wilson, the head coach and GM of the Pittsburgh Maulers. So, putting him above Larry Fedora is mainly due to 2 reasons. Number 1 is that he is a Super Bowl champion as a form of assistant coach. Now, he wasn't a coordinator or anything, he was a running backs coach, but he was a running back coach on the 2002 Buccaneers and the 2008 Steelers, and both those teams naturally won the Super Bowl, hence why he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. And I think that's something that is important, as having a guy who has championship winning experience at some level is a nice thing to have. And then the other reason is that he was a running back coach or a defensive coordinator at college and the pros. But as I said about how, the 15 years back kind of experience, well, he was in the NFL since 2002, and ever since then he's only been in the NFL. Before that, he was with USC as a receivers coach for 1 year, and then in the 90s, he was a coordinator. And I do think it's important to know, he was a defensive coordinator for a total of 3 years in the 90s, and then became a running backs coach. So I could see the Pittsburgh Maulers becoming a sort of, old Steelers type team since, Pittsburgh, I guess, where they play the run, they play hard-nosed football, you run the ball, have a strong defense. But putting him at 7, I think, is fair because once you get past the Super Bowl experience, his actual credentials are probably the least of everybody since he's just been a running back coach for all these years. Because, since 2002, he literally has been a running back coach for every single year, and he's changed teams quite a few times. He was the Buccaneers for 2 years, he was the Cardinals for 3 years, he was the Steelers for like 7 years, then he was the Vikings 2 years, the Browns 2 years, the Cardinals a year, and then the Raiders 2 years, and now he's with the Maulers as their head coach. So yeah, I think 7 is fair for him because of the fact that he does have Super Bowl winning experience, so he can provide that championship knowledge, and the fact that he has been involved in both college and the pros, even if college was a long time ago. But yeah, I think number 7 is fair. Coming in at number 6 is what I believe is the most volatile coach in this league, in Todd Haley. So he is going to be coaching the Bandits, and the reason I say volatile is I genuinely think his team is going to be either one of the 2 best or 2 worst teams in the league. To put it simply, when he was the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, it was a very mixed bag. On one hand, he helped make the Killer Bees a legitimately terrifying unit with Le'Veon, Antonio Brown, and Big Ben. But at the other side, the last couple years he was there, his offense was kind of questionable, and it led to him getting fired. And a lot of Steelers fans think it was a year or two too late. And then he only lasted with the Browns 1 year. And then since then, he hasn't coached at any professional or college level since 2018. So it's one of those things where he's been out of professional or high level football because he's been in high school a couple years as an OC, but in legit hardcore football he's been out for a bit. But he does have head coaching experience. He was the head coach of the Chiefs in 2009 to 2011, and they did make the playoffs, though he lost that game. But overall, he's been only an NFL assistant, but mainly an offensive coordinator, dating back to 2007 with the Cardinals, and then the 3 years as a head coach. But I think his team is either going to be a really legitimately good offense, or his bad sides of just some, bad play calls or bad management is going to come into play and affect the team really negligibly. I guess we have to just wait and see about this one. But the reason I'm putting him here is it's just the guys ahead of him, I have more faith are going to be good coaches. And even though I think Todd Haley can make one of the best teams in the league, it's just the fact that these other guys just seem to have more credentials or are just better qualified or just seem like they're better for the job overall, give them the edge over Todd Haley. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Kevin Sumlin. He's going to be the head coach and GM of the Houston Gamblers. So Kevin Sumlin has only been in college, and he has been in college as a head coach since 2008, and since then till 2020 he had always been a head coach. He was the Houston head coach for 2008 to 2011, Texas A&M 2012 to 2017, and then Arizona from 2018 to 2020. Overall, his record was a 95-63, which is a pretty solid record, and he was 4-3 in bowl games. Overall, he was actually an SEC Coach of the Year and 2 times a Conference USA Coach of the Year, both times when he won the division. But the reasoning I'm putting him at 5 is the other head coaches the other one head coach that is purely just a college guy, I think is better than him overall. And then 2, it's the fact that once he got to Arizona, his team was really questionable. He got fired mid-season when they were 0-5 in 2020. And overall, the whole time with Arizona, they were pretty bad. But then, yeah, he was really solid with Houston in the Conference USA. But like I said about Larry Fedora, it is Conference USA, so it's a little bit of you were good, but it's not like you were awesome in the ACC or something like that. So I think it's fair to say that with him. Yes, his 2011 Houston were 14th in the coaches polls, and then yes, his 2012 Aggies were actually 5th in the polls for both, which is really good. But once you get past that, 2013 he was 18th and he won the bowl game. Then 2014 he wasn't ranked, won a bowl game. 2015 he wasn't ranked, lost. 2016 he lost the bowl game again. Then 2017 was last year there. So I can't really put him any higher than 5. I think he deserves 5. I definitely think he's better than Larry Fedora, Kirby Wilson, and Todd Haley, but I don't think he's good enough to be in the top 4. Coming in at number 4 is going to be the head coach and GM of the Birmingham Stallions in Skip Holtz. Skip is above Kevin Sumlin, as he is the other head coach who was purely college. And in college, he was 152 and 121, which percentage-wise is a worse record than Kevin Sumlin. But the main reason I'm putting him above is the fact that he's 8-4 in bowl games, which does say a lot. As Kevin Sumlin was 4-3, so you have one more loss, but you have 4 more bowl game wins. And 8-4 in bowl games, that's really solid. He was in the Conference USA for a lot of years, though, which is the one downside to him, as since 2005 till 2021, he was always a head coach in Conference USA, which has made it really tough to debate putting Kevin Sumlin above or below him. But I ultimately gave it to Skip because he did go 8-4 in those bowl games. And it's not like he was always going against bad teams. I mean, when he was the head coach, he beat like Boise State, he beat Clemson in a bowl game before, Arkansas, Illinois, and then some other okay teams like SMU, Hawaii, and he did beat Miami. And he was a member of a lot of other bowl-winning games or teams when he was an assistant coach at like Florida, Colorado, or Notre Dame. And I think he does deserve it. He had 2 Conference USA titles, and he was a Conference USA Coach of the Year once, and he did win the division 5 times, twice in the East, 3 times in the West. I have to give him credit over Kevin Sumlin, though. Like I said, it's mainly because of the bowl games. When you're playing consistently in those bowl games, which Kevin Sumlin wasn't his whole time, whereas Skip Holtz was, you got to give him a lot of credit for that. Because the fact is, he was able to win at least one bowl game with every team he had coached after South Carolina for the first time. And the fact that he even won a bowl game with South Florida when he was there for literally 3 years is pretty incredible. So yeah, that's number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have the first of what I would say are probably the big 3 and I think the undisputed best 3 coaches in this league. Number 3 is the head coach and GM of the Generals, Mike Riley. So let's get started with this. Mike Riley overall was a head coach in the NFL for 3 years in 1999 and 2001 for the Chargers. He also was a head coach in college for Oregon State and Nebraska. And he was a head coach in the AAF for the Commanders, who, at the time of the league ceasing, were a playoff team. And he was an OC of the Seattle Dragons, which, the team was pretty bad, but what matters is the fact that he was a head coach and an OC in the last 2 spring football leagues. In bowl games, he had a really solid record of 7-3, which is even better than Skip Holtz percentage-wise. So you got to give him a lot of credit for that. He was a Pac-10 Coach of the Year. He has a couple Grey Cups as the head coach of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, which when you also look at that, you think, man, that's pretty solid. So he has 2 championships as a coach for the Blue Bombers in the CFL. He was a head coach for a playoff team in the AAF, and he won a lot of bowl games. That's legitimately really impressive. And it makes it really hard because, as I said, these top 3 are definitely the top 3 for me. But putting Mike Riley at 3rd is mainly it's because the Blue Bombers were back in the late 80s, 87 and 90s when he was there. That's 30 years ago. And then when he was the head coach of the Chargers, that was 20 years ago. But yes, he was a very solid head coach in college for a while, but that pro status, as I said, when you haven't been in the pros or collegiate level for like 15, 20 years, you do lose a little bit of credibility for that. But, you got to give him a lot of credit, though, as I said. He was a winner in the AAF, a winner in the CFL. He was a loser in the NFL with his Chargers. But hey, he is definitely top 3, and it arguably number 2 or 1, but I put him at 3. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the head coach of the Super Bowl losing 1 yard short Tennessee Titans. Yes, Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher is going to be the head coach and GM of the Michigan Panthers. And in his career as a coach, it is most known for, of course, the Tennessee Titans, where in Super Bowl 34, they famously lost by being 1 yard short in the Super Bowl. Overall, his career is genuinely a really, really solid one. Now, yes, it's easy to make fun of him because of the fact that in his last few years, starting from basically 2009 till 2015, almost every year they went 9-7, and I mean almost every year. 2008 they went 8-8, then 6-10. Then we went to St. Louis, they were 7-8-1, then 7-9, 6-10, 7-9. Yeah, and that is fair, and it also is fair to talk about the fact that he, after the Super Bowl loss, he only made it to the title game one more time with the Titans, and he kind of was really a tenured. Well, he was the longest tenured head coach for a while in the NFL, and it was kind of undeserved, as the team wasn't exactly the best for a long time. But the fact that he was a head coach for so long in the NFL is important to know. But the reason I put him at 2 is this: the fact that he is a champion as a player means he does have that championship experience. The fact that he made a team get to the Super Bowl as a head coach is really incredible. His overall coaching record, including postseason, is 178, 171, and 1, which is a 510 win percentage. Not the best, but when you think about how long he was in the NFL, it shows that he definitely knew what he was doing. He was a defensive coordinator for years before becoming the head coach, and it just shows that he definitely knows what he's doing. But here's why I put him at 2. I could see why you'd even put Mike Riley above him and the guy that I have number 1. But for me, the reason he's at 2 is because I think the Super Bowl experience getting there and then winning it as a player, I think just puts him a little bit above Mike Riley for how much he did as a head coach. But his lack of coaching, because since 2016 when he got fired with LA, all he was a Tennessee State advisor in 2021. And it's honestly really hard for me to even put him above Mike Riley. But when you think about the fact that he is the biggest name head coach in this league for a very fair reason, I gotta give him his props and put him at number 2. Coming in at number 1 for what I believe is the best head coach in the new USFL is going to be Bart Andrus, the head coach of the Philadelphia Stars. Now, this is definitely one that I feel like some people are going to question, as Mike Riley and Jeff Fisher very arguably have better credentials in a lot of ways. But as I said, I think what's important is what you did, not necessarily how well you did it, but more what you did. Because when you're talking about a league that is supplemental, it takes a lot of knowing pros and college to be that. First of all, he was also part of the coaching staff for Super Bowl 34 with Jeff Fisher. Now, he wasn't the head coach, but he was the quarterback coach for Steve McNair. And he had been on that team as an assistant for the offense and quarterbacks coach for a couple of years, but he was there. And then before that, he was a college head coach at Rocky Mountain, and it was only 1 year, to be fair, but they did go 6-4, so they were decent. And then in terms of the pros, he was a head coach in a lot of different places. Mainly, and yes, this is an out there one, was the Amsterdam Admirals of the NFL Europe, the World Football League. It changed the name a couple times. And in that league, he actually won a World Bowl. He won World Bowl 8, and he made it to World Bowl 9, which he lost, but he made it there. So the fact that he did win a title with them shows that he can win in those, special football leagues. I know that was probably the most out there of all of them, but he still did win in it. And he was also a coach for the CFL for a year with the Argonauts. He didn't do great, but he was still there. And then he was a head coach in just pretty much everything. The United Football League, he was a head coach there. The Spring League, which is the developmental thing they've been kind of doing, that was, the group that basically said we're going to make the USFL. He was the head coach of Team 9 in the XFL, which was basically like the practice squad team. And it's just, I feel like the fact that he has done so much in so many places gives him a really solid edge to actually, do something. He's just been everywhere. So when you've been to so many different places in different leagues, because Mike Riley was at a lot of places, but Bart Andrus went to Europe in that league. I mean, he was a coach in NFL in some places. He was in the CFL, the XFL, Spring League, United Football League. He's just been in every single place you can think of. And he hasn't had the most success, but he's been at least decent pretty much everywhere. I mean, when he was with Rocky Mountain, he was the NAIA Coach of the Year. So, I mean, he did something right there, if you know what I mean. And then, like, in 2005, he was the Europe League Coach of the Year. So, he can coach. And the fact that he's coached Team 9, I think, is a very, very good thing. To coach the practice squad of an entire league, which is basically what Team 9 was, it shows that you're able to connect and like make the guys that aren't the best better. And that's exactly what these spring leagues are. It's making the guys that either didn't make it in the draft or want to prove that they're good or prove they're not finished yet. Those type of guys are going to be in the USFL. And if you have experience with those type of players, which if you remember, I mean, James Harrison was in NFL Europe for a bit. So these kind of things do help. And that's why I put Bart Andrus number 1. I think 1, 2, and 3, Mike Riley, Jeff Fisher, and Bart Andrus are all interchangeable with your own arguments. But for me, I think Bart is the best coach out of these guys. And I guess it's fitting that he's with the Stars, who were the original best team in football. So this has been Zomfox. If you want to talk about who you have in your rankings or why, just let them know in the comments, and I'll probably talk to a lot of you guys about my thoughts on your opinions or your opinions on mine and stuff like that. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload anything news related or like this, a ranking, just subscribe and hit the bell notification, and have a great night.